Good morning, and if you're watching this video, it means that it is cold outside, the roads are frozen, and you just felt like it was safer for you and your family to stay home. We get that, totally understand it. So this is a quick video as a type of family devotional, if you will, so that you and your kids, your whole family can sit and watch this quick devotion as we continue this teaching series called Discover a Healthy Church. Throughout this series, we've been using our passage for the year, Romans chapter 12, verse 9 through 19, to be kind of a launching pad as we're also reminding ourselves and going kind of deep into our core values and reminding ourselves of those four core values. What are those core values? Let's quickly remind ourselves that our core values are: we passionately pursue God, we love endlessly, we give generously, and we change our world. Now, all of these are based on Acts chapter 2, verse 42 through 47. And this year, we're using our passage for the year, Romans chapter 12, verse 9 through 19, to remind us and give us like very clear, specific ways of how we as followers of Jesus live out a healthy Christian life. Now, this is important because a healthy church is built on healthy Christians. And so if we're going to be a healthy church, that means we who call ourselves Discover Church family need to be growing in our health and our relationship with Jesus. So let's start off today by reminding ourselves of Romans chapter 12, verse 9 through 19. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this passage on the screen, but I want you to press pause and I want all of you and your family to read this passage together. Now, if there's one thing that I want you to remember from today's video, one thing, just one thing and nothing else, it is this: God will change my world through me when I allow Him to change me. One more time. God will change my world through me when I allow Him to change me. Now, for this, today we are going to be focusing on the last few verses of our passage, verses 17 through 19. Verses 17 through 19. So again, I'm going to put those words on the screen, those verses on the screen. I want you to press pause and reread those verses as a family. What a strong reminder that as followers of Jesus, we live counterculturally. See, when the world says it's time to get even, Jesus says, hey, trust me. When the world says defend your reputation, Jesus says just surrender your reputation to me. When the world says it's time to retaliate, Jesus says, no, leave room for God. See, Christians, we don't change the world by matching the world's anger or outrage. We change the world by living differently, by refusing to get revenge, by trusting God with justice, by believing that restraint can be more powerful than retaliation. The Bible is not naive. Romans chapter 12 is not naive. It's not weak. It's not passive. It's a declaration that God can do more with surrendered hearts than we could ever do in our anger. We believe that God can do more when we trust Him than when we take our clenched fist to the world. We don't believe that God changes the world through our outrage or through our anger. We believe that God changes the world through me when I allow Him to change the world in me. One of the hardest So here's the big question. Do we trust God enough to let Him handle what we want to get even for? Do we trust God enough to let Him handle whatever we want to get it even for? There's a story in the Old Testament that is a really good picture of this lesson. It's the story of David. It's one of my favorite stories in the Bible, actually, of a man who has every right to get even, but trusts God no matter what. Let me give you a little context of what's happening in this passage that we're about to look at. We often think of King David and we think of victory. We think of him defeating Goliath. You might think of all the psalms and songs that he's written, the battles that he's won. He was called a man after God's own heart. But the David that we are looking at today is a David later in life. This is David after failure. This is David after compromise. This is David after consequences. And David has made some real mistakes. His private sins have become very public scars. And while God has forgiven him, there's these ripple effects of those choices that they're still unfolding. As a result of David's sin, his family is fractured. His home is unstable. His leadership is under pressure. His own son Absalom has rejected David and has won the hearts of all the people, and the city that David built no longer feels safe for him to live in. The throne that God promised David is now slipping away, and he has to leave his own home. He has to run away from his city. It's a moment of deep loss, loss of position, loss of reputation, loss of control. And then we have David, and on top of all of that, he's under attack. So the question we're asking throughout reading this passage is, how do we respond when we feel like we're under attack? When life is not fair, what do we do? How do we respond? Let's learn a few lessons from David. The first lesson that we want to learn is there any truth to what is being said? We're going to ask the question, is there any truth to this situation? You see, Shimei, he curses David publicly. He throws stones. He calls him names. He accuses him of bloodshed. And what makes this kind of uncomfortable in all of this is that Shimei wasn't completely wrong. Think about it, the fact that David really was a murderer. I mean, he did plan the death of Uriah the Hittite. David had repented of that, and God had forgiven him, but there are still consequences. Repentance doesn't erase all of the consequences. So this is part of that consequence. And David was a murderer, but he didn't defend himself. He doesn't rewrite history. He doesn't pretend that he's innocent. You see, if we want to be healthy Christians, we aren't going to deny our past, but we're not going to let it define us either. See, healthy Christians don't pretend that there's never truth in criticism. We want truth tellers in our lives. Healthy Christians, they let God use even the painful words of people to keep us humble. See, David doesn't look at this guy Shimei and ask him, how do I shut this guy up, right? He doesn't ask the question, what do I need to do to get rid of this guy? Instead, he asks a harder question that maybe we should all be asking. Is God trying to say something to me? You see, that's a complete reframing of the moment. Most of the time when we interpret criticism, it's an attack to be defended against. But what if we're able to change the way? What if we're able to reframe it instead of having deflection, allow it to be some reflection, some self-awareness? Lord, what are you trying to show me about me in this moment? Because if we're going to change the world around us, we have to first allow God to change the world in us. So how do we respond when we're under attack? First, we ask this question, is there any truth to what's being said here? Now, verse 9. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse the Lord the king? Let me go over and cut his head off." But the king said, "What does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, 'Curse David,' who can ask, 'Why do you do this?'" So how do we respond when someone is attacking us, when we feel under attack, when we feel like we want revenge? The second thing we do is we got to be careful who we listen to. See, Abishai steps in and sounds like a good friend. "Why should this dead dog curse the Lord my king? Let me go and cut off his head." Abishai means well in his suggestion. He's loyal, but his advice is worldly. It's not godly. Now, this is an important lesson. Not everyone who loves you is going to give you wise and godly advice. Not everyone who loves you is going to give you wise and godly advice. Honestly, when your closest friends and family see what you're going through and the depth of pain and humiliation that you might be facing, they're going to want to come to your aid. They're going to want to protect you. They're going to want to ease your burden, and they want to be on your team because they love you. The truth is, though, oftentimes your closest friends and family, they'll validate your anger instead of shepherding your soul. This happens in almost every setting, but it's also most easily seen when in a breakup or in a divorce, right? I mean, what happens most of the times in those kinds of situations? Friends pick sides. Stories get exaggerated. Reputation assassination begins. But here's the truth. A personal attack doesn't just reveal my spiritual maturity. It also reveals the spiritual maturity of my friends around me. Because when I'm hurt, the people closest to me, they don't just comfort me. The people closest to me also shape my response. So how do I know if the voices that are speaking into my life during this time of hurt, pain, and humiliation, when I feel under attack, how do I know that they're helping me grow? Or are they pulling me backwards? Are they pushing me into a healthy Christ-like response? Or are they pulling me away from a healthy Christ-like response? Well, here's a few thoughts. Spiritually immature friends will immediately pick sides and demonize the other person. Spiritually immature friends will validate every emotion without challenging any reaction. Spiritually immature friends will confuse venting with wisdom and outrage with strength. Spiritually immature friends will push you towards retaliation and call it standing up for yourself. Spiritually immature friends will get louder about justice than they do about Jesus. Spiritually immature friends will want you to feel better fast, even if it costs you integrity. You see, here's the basic thing about immature spirituality. These people who give us advice in those moments, these spiritually immature Christians, they don't ask what would honor God. Instead, they ask, how do we make them pay? See, David had Abishai, a loyal friend with bad advice. But David was very careful who he listened to. See, spiritually mature friends will acknowledge your pain, but they don't fuel your anger. Spiritually mature friends will help you tell the truth without exaggeration or bitterness. Spiritually mature friends will slow you down instead of hyping you up. Spiritually mature friends will ask questions like, what does honoring God look like here? Spiritually mature friends will care more about your heart than you winning an argument. And spiritually mature friends will remind you who you are, not just what has done to you. Honestly, spiritually mature friends are going to encourage you to resolve conflict biblically. You can find this very clear model of conflict resolution in Matthew chapter 18, 15 through 17. Basically, it goes like this. When somebody sinned against you, when they've hurt you, you go to them. person to person. You go to them, address the issue. This is what you did. This is how it made me feel. This is how I interpreted it. This is how I'm internalizing it. You address that problem. Now, if they brush you off, they ignore you, you can't resolve the conflict, then you bring in some spiritual advisors in your life, a ministry leader, right? A pastor. You bring in someone in your life who can help moderate this issue. And then if it isn't resolved, then you take further steps. So we're asking this question, how do we respond when we're under attack? First, ask if there's any truth to what's being said. Second, be careful who you listen to. Third, trust God's authority more than your power. See, David had the power to stop in this moment. At any moment, he could silence this person who is attacking him. But David keeps walking. He takes the hard, humiliating high road. And he essentially says, if God allows this, I will trust him. David released vengeance, he released justice to God and keeps moving forward. And here's what's interesting. We're never told if this moment was explicitly part of God's plans for consequences of David's sin. And honestly, David died never knowing if God dealt with Shimei or not. So let me lean in and ask you this question. Be very honest with yourself. Who do you want to be in charge of the revenge? Who do you want to be in charge of the vengeance? Who do you want to be in charge of justice? Do you want to keep that in your hands? Do you want to be in charge of it? Or are you willing to let God be in charge of it? Our passage for the year, verse 17, Romans chapter 12, verse 17. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends upon you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. Now, if we look really closely at this story of David, him walking down the road, a person cursing him, throwing rocks at him, showering him with dirt and dust. If we look closely, it's a foreshadowing of Jesus. Because just like David had the right, the power, the authority to strike back against this man who was rejecting him as king and cursing him and pelting him with rocks and dirt, in the same way, Jesus had every right to strike back against a world that had rejected him. He had every reason to demand justice for the injustice that had been done to him, for the betrayal, for the mocking, for the beating, the ultimate injustice of being crucified. He had every right to reject all of it. But instead, he walked the road to Golgotha. He bore the punishment that we deserve. Do we want to talk about justice, if we want to talk about fairness, the ultimate injustice is that we rebelled against God and he gives us love and mercy instead. So today, how are you going to respond? I encourage you one more time. God will change the world around us when we allow him to change the world in us. So if you're carrying some hurt, some pain, some unforgiveness, some bitterness, I want to encourage you, spend some time with Jesus today. surrender those feelings and trust Him with the